Savannah adjusted her seat in the dim corner of the restaurant, fidgeting with her glass of wine as her eyes darted toward the entrance. Her heartbeat was an uneven rhythm against her ribs, urging her to keep watch for any familiar faces that might unexpectedly invade her space. She couldn't afford to be seen here, not with him. Not with Alex. He was across the table, his charm evident even in the subtle way he scanned the menu. Savannah had met Alex only weeks ago, and their connection felt magnetic, drawing her out of the gray areas in her life into something more vivid. But tonight, there was a sense of danger, an added thrill, knowing her husband, Liam, believed she was out with her friends, sharing a harmless dinner. Alex glanced up, catching her eye, and Savannah felt the familiar flutter in her chest. "I thought Italian would be a safe choice," he said with a soft smile. "No chance Liam would wander into an out-of-the-way place like this?" Savannah laughed nervously, though there was an edge of anxiety in it. "Liam sticks to his routines. He wouldn't think to look for me here." Their conversation drifted towards safe topics: the cuisine, recent movies, upcoming events. But under it all, there was a lingering awareness that both were walking a thin line. Savannah felt the weight of her decisions more heavily each time Alex leaned in, every time he brushed her hand under the table. Just as the waiter returned to take their order, Savannah's phone vibrated against the table. She caught her breath as she glanced down at the screen. It was Liam. For a split second, panic overtook her. She forced herself to answer, willing her voice into calmness. "Hey, Liam," she greeted, keeping her tone light and casual, though she felt Alex's gaze fixed on her, studying her every reaction. "Hey, Savannah," Liam's voice was warm, filled with trust she'd never thought to betray, until now. "Just wanted to see how you're doing. Are you having a good time with the girls?" Savannah hesitated. Her mind raced as she concocted an image of her friends' usual meeting spots. "Yes, we're at our usual place, actually. It's nice to catch up. We haven't done this in a while," she lied smoothly. "That's great. I just wanted to check in," Liam replied, his tone affectionate but slightly reserved, as though sensing something beyond her words. "Don't stay out too late, okay?" Savannah assured him with the faintest smile and hung up, setting her phone face down on the table, hoping her pulse would slow down. The entire exchange took mere seconds, but the weight of it left her breathless. When she glanced up, Alex's gaze was questioning, a mix of intrigue and empathy. She knew he understood the depth of what she risked being here tonight. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low enough to be a comfort, almost a whisper. Savannah nodded. "It's just difficult, you know?" Alex's hand reached across the table, gently brushing against hers. "We don't have to do this if it feels wrong. I'm here because you want me to be, not because you have to." But the gentle offer of an exit didn't make her want to leave. It made her want him more. She leaned in, her defenses softening. "I just don't want Liam to know," she murmured. Alex nodded. They shared a quiet understanding, each aware that crossing these boundaries meant stepping into a world they couldn't easily return from. Savannah tried to focus on her conversation with Alex, but her mind still buzzed with the tension from Liam's unexpected call. She reminded herself to stay calm, to enjoy this moment with Alex. But just as she managed to settle her nerves, she glanced over Alex's shoulder and froze. Liam had walked into the restaurant. He was accompanied by Emily, his lawyer, a tall woman with an air of cool professionalism and sharp, watchful eyes. Savannah's stomach twisted as she watched them approach the hostess, who smiled and led them to a table just a few steps away from where she and Alex sat. She tore her gaze away, trying to conceal her alarm. "Savannah?" Alex asked, noticing her sudden change in demeanor. She forced a smile. "Nothing. Just startled." But Savannah couldn't keep her eyes off Liam, who hadn't yet noticed her. He looked uncharacteristically serious, his hand resting on the small of Emily's back as he guided her to their seats. Savannah couldn't help but wonder why Liam would be meeting with Emily here of all places, and at this hour. Did he somehow know she was here? Her heart pounded as she wrestled with the impulse to leave, yet she felt glued to her chair. Liam finally looked around, and their eyes met. His face registered shock, then hurt, before he masked his emotions with a blank expression. Emily, oblivious to the tension, was arranging her files and laptop on the table, clearly prepared for a long discussion. Desperation coursed through Savannah as she realized there was no hiding now. Taking a deep breath, she stood up, signaling Alex to follow her lead. She approached Liam and Emily, pasting on the most natural smile she could muster. "Liam," she said, feigning surprise. "I didn't expect to see you here." Liam's gaze flicked from her to Alex, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Clearly," he said, his voice cold. "What are you doing here, Savannah? And with him?" His emphasis on the last word cut through her like a knife. Savannah's cheeks flushed, but she maintained her composure. "This is Alex, a friend," she said, reaching for the safest explanation she could manage. "We just decided to catch up. Nothing unusual." Alex nodded, extending his hand to Liam, though he looked understandably uncomfortable. "Nice to meet you, Liam. I've heard a lot about you." Liam ignored Alex's hand, his focus on Savannah. "Just a friend," he repeated, his tone layered with incredulity. His lawyer, Emily, watched the exchange quietly, her eyes moving from Liam to Savannah, observing every flicker of expression. "Yes," Savannah said firmly. "Liam, it's not what it looks like. Alex and we're just friends, that's all." Liam leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms as he scrutinized her. "Funny timing," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I just happened to show up here, and you're having a secret dinner with some guy I've never heard about until now." Savannah felt her resolve wavering under his accusing gaze. Emily cleared her throat, drawing attention to herself. "I think we should take a moment to keep things calm," she suggested, her tone neutral but firm. "This doesn't have to be uncomfortable." "Of course, there's no need for discomfort," Savannah agreed quickly. "I can explain everything. We're just two friends grabbing a bite, nothing more." "Just friends?" Liam's voice was barely controlled. "You kept mentioning dinner with friends when we talked, but I didn't realize it was one man I'd never met." Savannah's heart raced as she realized her story wasn't holding up. "Liam, it's really not what you think." Emily, who seemed sympathetic but alert, intervened gently. "Perhaps we should let this be," she suggested to Liam, but her eyes lingered on Savannah with curiosity. "Whatever's going on here, it's up to Savannah to clarify, if she wants to." Liam scoffed, his anger flaring. "Clarify what, exactly?" He looked at Alex with open disdain, shaking his head in disbelief. "A friend? You're just a friend to my wife?" Alex raised his hands, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. "Liam, honestly, that's all it is. We're friends. Savannah and I met through a work event a few weeks ago, and we thought we'd grab dinner tonight. I'm sorry if this seems inappropriate." Savannah nodded, desperate to reinforce Alex's story. "Yes, exactly. I just didn't mention it because I knew how it would look." Liam's gaze hardened, and he folded his arms, unrelenting. "Oh, you knew how it would look, yet here you are?" Emily gently placed a hand on Liam's shoulder, trying to calm him, but he shrugged her off. "Savannah, I trusted you," he said, his voice low, almost pleading, as if he still held onto a shred of hope that she could explain this all away. Feeling trapped, Savannah tried to make her voice sound steady. "Liam, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you or make you suspicious. I needed a night out, some time away. I didn't think you'd be here with Emily either." Emily's phone buzzed, interrupting the silence. She glanced at the screen and quickly excused herself from the table, giving them a moment of privacy. Savannah sensed that the layers of deceit between her and Liam had left a fracture too deep to repair in this public confrontation, but she held on to her last shred of composure. Liam leaned in, his tone barely controlled. "Savannah, if you want to end this marriage, just say it. But don't insult me by pretending this is innocent." Savannah's throat tightened, and she reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "Liam, I don't want to end anything," she whispered, the desperation clear in her voice. I just needed someone to talk to, someone who's not part of our life." Liam's expression softened for a fleeting moment before he caught himself. "And I suppose you thought that could never be me," he said bitterly. Emily returned, her expression unreadable as she glanced between the three of them. "Perhaps we should wrap up for the night, Liam. We can discuss things tomorrow," she suggested diplomatically, though Savannah saw something in her eyes that made her wonder how much she had already pieced together. Liam stood up, his face impassive, but Savannah caught the briefest flicker of hurt in his eyes before he turned away. He took a deep breath, then looked at Alex with an unreadable expression. "Take care of my wife," he said, his tone icy. "Since you're her friend." With that, he turned to Emily, who nodded, and they left the restaurant. Savannah felt herself unraveling as she watched Liam leave, knowing that the tenuous lie she had tried to construct had fallen apart. Alex, beside her, reached out to her hand, offering support, but Savannah barely felt it. The weight of her own choices crashed down on her, leaving her silent, staring into the empty seat that Liam had left behind. As Savannah and Alex sat together in the aftermath of Liam's departure, Savannah's mind raced with fear and regret. She could still feel the lingering tension from Liam's accusations, the wounded expression in his eyes, the pain that cut through his voice. She wanted to believe that things hadn't spiraled too far out of control, that with enough explanations she could repair what was broken. But then, Liam re-entered the restaurant. The air felt like it was sucked out of the room as he walked toward their table, his expression unreadable but determined. He stopped just before them, hands tucked into his pockets. Emily followed closely, her face set in an impassive expression, a phone in her hand. There was a strange gleam in Liam's eyes as he took a slow, deliberate breath, pulling out his own phone with a chilling calm. "Liam," Savannah started, scrambling to come up with the right words. "I know how this looks, but Liam held up a hand, silencing her. "No more explanations, Savannah," he said quietly, his gaze now directed at Alex. "You see, I didn't come here just to confront you. I came here with proof." Savannah's face blanched, while Alex's calm expression shifted slightly. "What are you talking about?" Alex asked, though a hint of unease cracked through his confidence. Liam didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pressed a button on his phone, and from the speakers, a familiar voice filled the air. It was Alex's. The recording crackled with background noise, but his voice was unmistakable. "Yeah, Savannah and I have been seeing each other for a while." Alex's voice laughed lightly in the recording, sounding casual, almost arrogant. "Her husband doesn't suspect a thing. She tells him she's out with friends or working late. It's almost too easy." Savannah gasped, her hand covering her mouth, horror flooding her face as she tried to process what she was hearing. She glanced at Alex, who was frozen, the color draining from his face. "Liam, it's not," Savannah began, her words catching in her throat. But the recording continued, mercilessly. Alex's voice kept going, his tone smug. "It's actually pretty funny. She complains about him all the time. Says he's too dull, too wrapped up in his job. She's with me because I give her the excitement he can't. I'm the one she runs to when she needs to feel alive." Liam paused the recording, letting the last words hang in the air like a judgment. His face was a mask of pain, his jaw clenched tightly. He turned to Savannah, his voice barely above a whisper. "Care to explain, Savannah?" Savannah's mind raced as she tried to grasp for any words that might undo the damage, but nothing came. She glanced at Alex, hoping for some kind of denial, some explanation that could justify this, but his face said it all. His eyes darted between Liam and Savannah, and she could see the panic setting in. "Liam, please, it's not how it sounds," she said, her voice trembling. "This was a mistake, a misunderstanding. I don't even know how—" Liam cut her off with a cold laugh. "Misunderstanding? Really? You're going to stand there and call this a misunderstanding?" At this, Alex finally broke his silence, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "Look, I think there's been a misinterpretation," he stammered, his confidence crumbling. "I never meant for this to get so messy." "Oh, it's messy all right," Liam replied, his tone biting. "You call it a misinterpretation, but you were perfectly fine bragging about your relationship with my wife. You think I'm some fool who doesn't see what's going on?" Alex's face twisted with frustration, and he looked around as if searching for an escape. "Savannah," he said quickly, "maybe we should go." But before Savannah could respond, Liam stepped forward, blocking Alex's path. "You're not going anywhere until you answer me, Alex," he said, his voice low but filled with restrained fury. Was it all a game to you? Just another conquest? Alex's eyes darted from Liam to Savannah, and he began to sweat, realizing the walls were closing in. He stood up, trying to sidestep Liam, but Liam didn't budge. The tension between them was palpable, drawing the attention of nearby diners who began to watch the scene unfold. Look, I didn't know this would blow up like this, okay? Alex finally snapped, his voice defensive. She told me things were rough between you two. That's all I knew. Savannah's eyes widened as she realized the shallow depth of Alex's loyalty. The reality of her mistake hit her harder than she could have imagined. So that's your excuse? Liam shot back. You had no problem getting involved with a married woman, but now that the truth's out, you're ready to run? Alex looked at Savannah, his face pale, and shook his head. I didn't sign up for this. I'm not here to destroy your life, Savannah. The words felt like a slap to her face. He wasn't there to destroy her life, but he'd helped her do it herself, bit by bit. And now, when it mattered most, he was trying to escape responsibility. No, Alex, she said, her voice faint, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. You don't get to leave me with this mess. You were part of this too. Part of this? Alex replied, his voice rising. You're the one who started it, remember? You're the one who made the first move. I was just along for the ride. Liam shook his head in disbelief. Unbelievable, he muttered. You're both equally responsible. Alex shot him a glare but said nothing, too caught up in his own panic to defend himself any further. With a final, cold look at Savannah, he turned on his heel, heading toward the exit without another word. Alex! Savannah called out, desperate, but he didn't stop. She could only watch as he pushed open the door and disappeared into the night, leaving her alone to face the wreckage. As the door swung shut, silence settled around them. Savannah turned back to Liam, her expression a mix of regret and despair. The weight of her choices pressed down on her, suffocating her. Liam, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please, let's just talk. I know I messed up, but please, just give me a chance to explain. But Liam looked back at her, his face now a mask of indifference. Explain what, Savannah? You've already said enough. Savannah took a step forward, reaching out to him, but he took a step back, keeping his distance. The finality of his actions crushed any remaining hope she'd clung to. Without another word, Liam turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Savannah standing alone amidst the quiet whispers and curious stares of the remaining patrons. As the door swung shut behind Liam, Savannah stood frozen, surrounded by the stares of other diners. The reality of her situation settled in like a thick fog. She was alone. Alex had left, Liam had walked out, and now, every eye in the room seemed to be fixated on her, their curiosity morphing into something darker, a mix of pity and judgment. The waiter, who had been watching the unfolding drama from a respectful distance, approached with a bill folder in his hand. Savannah looked down at it, her stomach churning. She hadn't even considered the logistics of the evening, how much they'd ordered, the price of each item, or the fact that Liam had likely expected her to handle it after his devastating confrontation. She flipped open the folder and stared at the number, realizing the dinner was much more extravagant than she'd anticipated. There was wine, appetizers, entrees, and a decadent dessert Liam hadn't even stayed to taste. Her cheeks flushed, and she fumbled for her credit card, trying to keep her hands steady as she handed it to the waiter. He took it without a word, but his expression was difficult to read, a mixture of forced professionalism and awkward sympathy. She could feel her heart pounding, each beat loud and merciless. When the waiter returned, Savannah signed the bill with trembling fingers, her signature a shaky scrawl that barely resembled her own. She left the restaurant quickly, head down, hoping to escape the stares and whispers that trailed her. Outside, the night was cool, and the fresh air filled her lungs, but it didn't relieve the weight pressing down on her chest. Her mind replayed Liam's parting words, the recording, the look on his face. She felt like she was unraveling, each thread of her life pulling away faster than she could stop it. By the time Savannah arrived home, dread had settled deep in her bones. She knew Liam would be waiting, and there would be no room for excuses or half-hearted apologies. This time, he had seen through it all, and she could sense he was done. She opened the door, and the sight of Liam's suitcase by the entrance was like a punch to the gut. He was standing in the living room, arms crossed, his expression resolute. Emily, his lawyer, stood by his side, her face a careful mask of neutrality, holding a thin stack of papers in her hand. Savannah's breath caught. She hadn't expected Emily to be here, in her home, bearing witness to what was about to unfold. "Liam," she started, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, can we talk?" Liam's gaze was cold, distant, and unyielding. "There's nothing left to talk about, Savannah. I've made my decision." Her eyes flickered to the suitcase, dread pooling in her stomach. "You're leaving?" Liam's expression hardened. "Yes. I've already called a few friends, and I'll be staying with them tonight. Emily is here to help finalize what needs to be done. She has everything ready for a preliminary agreement. I want a divorce, Savannah." The words hit her like a physical blow, and she staggered slightly, reaching for the back of a chair to steady herself. "Liam, please don't do this. I made a mistake, a horrible mistake, but I can fix it. I love you." He let out a bitter laugh. "Love me? You call what you did love? You humiliated me, Savannah. You lied to my face, and then, even after all that, you let me sit there while you made a fool of me with Alex." His voice wavered, barely able to contain the anger beneath the surface. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "I was lost, confused. I just needed something. I didn't think." "You didn't think about me, that's for sure," Liam interrupted, his tone ice cold. "You didn't think about how much I trusted you, about the life we'd built together. No, you only thought about yourself." Emily cleared her throat gently, interrupting the tense silence. "Savannah, I'm here to represent Liam's interests. These papers outline the basic terms of the divorce, including division of assets and responsibilities. You'll need to review them, and then we can proceed with a more formal arrangement." Savannah felt a surge of panic as she looked at the papers Emily held out, a stark reminder of the finality of Liam's decision. Her eyes filled with tears. "Liam, don't do this. Give me a chance to make things right. We can go to counseling, work through this. I'll do anything." But Liam shook his head, his face unmoved. "It's too late for that, Savannah. I've already heard more than enough, especially that recording. There's no coming back from this." She watched as he picked up his suitcase, his movements decisive, without a hint of hesitation. "I'll be in touch about the formalities," he said, heading toward the door. He paused for a brief moment, as though he might have one last word for her, some last piece of their life together to share. But he only glanced at her, his eyes empty, before walking out without a backward glance. As the door closed behind him, Savannah felt the full weight of her choices crashing down on her. Emily set the stack of papers on the coffee table with quiet efficiency, watching Savannah's expression with a professional detachment. "Savannah," she began softly, "I'll leave these here. I suggest you take some time to review them carefully. We'll follow up in a few days." Savannah nodded weakly, barely able to process the situation. She watched Emily leave, her mind blank as the door clicked shut once more. Now, she was truly alone, standing in a house that no longer felt like a home. The silence of the empty room echoed around her, each tick of the clock amplifying her isolation. She sank onto the couch, the divorce papers lying in front of her, a tangible symbol of the life she'd destroyed. Her hands trembled as she touched the top sheet, her name and Liam's printed neatly at the top, as though their marriage had been reduced to nothing more than ink on paper. Every memory of their life together flooded her mind. The vacations, the quiet mornings, the laughter and love they'd shared. Each one felt like a ghost now, a reminder of what she'd lost. She could still remember the early days of their relationship, the promises they'd made, the certainty that they would be together forever. She'd taken it all for granted, and now it was slipping through her fingers like sand. Savannah sat in silence for hours, her gaze unfocused, her mind looping through the evening's events. The disbelief, the anger, the regret, they all melded into a suffocating blanket of despair. It wasn't until the early hours of the morning that she finally moved, picking up the divorce papers with a numb resignation. She would read them later, she decided, maybe tomorrow or the day after that. Tonight, she could only sit alone with the weight of her mistakes, her empty house a monument to the life she'd thrown away. As the first rays of dawn began to filter through the windows, Savannah realized just how empty her future now felt. The betrayal, the humiliation, and the irrevocable end of her marriage all settled in, leaving her hollow and adrift. Liam was gone, and with him, the life she had once thought was hers forever. Now, all she could do was face the silence of the life she'd shattered, a silence that would be her only companion in the days to come. The courtroom was tense, filled with an uneasy quiet that magnified the echoes of each movement and whisper. Savannah sat at her table, her heart pounding in her chest, watching as Liam entered with a purposeful stride. He didn't look at her, his expression set in stone, his gaze forward as he took his seat across from her. Liam's lawyer, Emily, sat beside him, her presence a reminder of the professionalism and strategy that had led them here, ready to dismantle Savannah's defense. Savannah's own lawyer, a man named Robert, sat beside her, exuding a calm confidence. He assured her that they'd build a case on her behalf, to show Liam her remorse and her willingness to work things out. But Savannah knew that wouldn't be easy, not with what was at stake and the pile of evidence that had been brought against her. The trial began with formalities, the judge reviewing their case file in an almost detached manner. But when it was time for Liam's side to present their evidence, Savannah felt the tension twist into something almost unbearable. Emily stood, addressing the court with her signature blend of grace and tenacity. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady and clear, "today we're here to present indisputable evidence of infidelity on the part of Savannah, which led to the irreversible breakdown of trust in her marriage with my client, Liam." Savannah's throat tightened as she glanced at Liam, but he avoided her gaze. Emily continued, producing a thick folder and distributing copies to the judge and Savannah's attorney. This folder contains a timeline of the events surrounding Mrs. Harrison's extramarital relationship, Emily said, turning to face Savannah. These include not only recorded conversations but text messages, photographs, and bank statements detailing the evenings she spent with her companion, Mr. Alex Preston. Savannah's face turned red as she tried to keep her composure. She glanced at Robert, her lawyer, who nodded at her reassuringly, but his confidence didn't penetrate her growing panic. Emily approached the court's projection screen, connecting her laptop and queuing up a series of images. One by one, the images appeared, each one more damning than the last. The first was a photograph of Savannah and Alex at a dimly lit bar, their heads close as they laughed together. Then came a text message exchange between her and Alex, the language flirtatious, littered with promises to meet again, comments about the excitement they shared, the thrill of sneaking away. Savannah's pulse throbbed as she watched her private words exposed in such a public way, each message a hammer blow to her carefully constructed composure. The final blow was a recording, one she hadn't known Liam possessed. In it, she could be heard laughing, her voice low and confiding. "Liam just doesn't get it, you know? He's good but predictable. I just want something that feels alive." She looked down, unable to meet the eyes of the judge, the jury, or especially Liam. The recording continued, her voice almost casual as she confided in Alex about her frustrations and discontentment, words she barely recognized now, words she regretted with every fiber of her being. Emily stopped the recording, letting the silence fill the courtroom as everyone absorbed the weight of what they'd just heard. "Your Honor," Emily said, her tone turning softer, "this is the reality of my client's marriage. Mr. Harrison invested years of his life, his trust, and his love into this relationship, only to have it betrayed in the most hurtful way. We ask for a swift and fair judgment in favor of Mr. Harrison." The judge nodded, her expression grave as she turned to Robert. "Mr. Wallace, you may present the defense." Robert rose slowly, adjusting his suit as he took a deep breath. He turned to Savannah, giving her a small nod of reassurance before addressing the court. "Your Honor, while it's true that mistakes were made, Savannah has shown clear remorse for her actions. She regrets deeply the choices she made and is here today to appeal to Mr. Harrison's understanding and compassion." Savannah fought back tears, her hands trembling as Robert continued. "We don't dispute the facts that have been presented, but we ask the court to consider the context." Savannah had been feeling neglected, struggling to find her place in her own marriage, and made choices she regrets. She is willing to do whatever it takes to make amends, to seek reconciliation. But as Robert spoke, Savannah knew, deep down, that Liam's face, unyielding and impassive, told her the real story. He wasn't here to listen to apologies or consider reconciliation. He was here to finalize an end. When it was Savannah's turn to speak, she stood, her legs shaky as she addressed the judge. "Your Honor," she began, her voice thick with emotion, "I know I can't take back what I've done, but I ask for Liam's forgiveness. I let my feelings get the better of me, and I hurt the man I love. I am truly sorry. I want the chance to make things right, to show him that this doesn't have to be the end." She turned to Liam, her voice breaking as she reached out to him. "Liam, please. I'm sorry. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But we can rebuild, we can heal. Don't let this be the end of us." Liam finally met her gaze, his eyes steely, his jaw set. He didn't speak immediately, and the weight of his silence was like a judgment in itself. When he did speak, his words were barely more than a whisper, but they held a finality that broke her heart. "Savannah, this is the end," he said, his voice filled with an emotion that was half pain, half cold determination. "You made your choices, and you knew exactly what you were doing. I can't live with someone who treated our life, our marriage, as something disposable." Savannah tried to respond, but her words faltered, the weight of his rejection cutting deeper than she'd imagined possible. She felt like she was drowning, the courtroom's silence pressing down on her, suffocating her. The judge, watching the emotional exchange, finally spoke. "I understand this is a difficult time for both parties," she said, her tone compassionate but firm. "Given the evidence presented, I am inclined to rule in favor of Mr. Harrison." The ruling was swift, the terms discussed clinically, division of assets, custody arrangements for their dog, stipulations about future communication. Savannah barely heard it, her mind numb as she watched Liam sign the final documents, the line of his pen sealing the end of their life together. When it was over, Liam stood, gathering his papers and avoiding her gaze as he prepared to leave the courtroom. Savannah felt a last surge of desperation. She called out to him, her voice raw. "Liam, please. Don't do this. We can still find a way back to each other." But Liam didn't turn. Emily placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, guiding him out of the courtroom. Savannah watched him go, his form receding until he disappeared through the doors, leaving her alone in the cold, empty silence of the courtroom. As she sank into her chair, the finality of her actions settled heavily on her. She had lost everything. Her husband, her marriage, her life as she knew it. The courtroom, once bustling with people and emotions, now felt hollow, just like her.